In 1306, Robert the Bruce probably had one of the most stressful years ever in his history. He'd murdered his rival, John Comyn. He'd stabbed him to death in Greyfriars churchyard in Dumfries. He'd ousted the small English garrison at Dalswinton Castle nearby. And at Scone, he had himself crowned King of Scots in complete defiance to Edward Plantagenet I, Longshanks himself. So that act alone was more than enough to get him hung, drawn and quartered. Shortly thereafter, Bruce turned up with a force. Now, some of the force wore hoods to conceal their identity at St Johnstown, which we currently know as Perth. The Earl of Pembroke, Aymer de Valence, a man who knew Bruce very well, they knew each other. Bruce offered him battle that day. Pembroke refused. There are a couple of reasons, but he didn't want to fight in the Sabbath, which seems the more likely one, and he offered Bruce battle the very next day. Taking Pembroke at his word, knowing de Valence to be a chivalrous knight, Bruce retired here with his small force at Methven. As soon as Bruce had departed from St Johnstown, de Valence made plans that night. Bruce had a price on his head, and anyone who caught Bruce, killed him, or massacred the army, they would be in for a heavy reward. So they descended upon the camp here at dawn the next day. It became a rout. Bruce, in a panic with his men, not knowing what to do, the English were upon them, killing some of them while they slept here in the woods at Methven. Now, they camped here because there was water nearby. And I've walked around this area quite a bit looking for likely camping spots. It would have been heavily wooded back then. Common rule of thumb is, if it's heavily wooded now, equally with a small population, it would have been heavily wooded back then. But there's a short bit of ground up there, more like a meadow, a sloping field, which goes down to the river. That's where, personally, I think it would have been practical and tactical to camp there. Bruce never posted any lookouts. There were no pickets to overlook. Such was his faith in Pembroke's word, but they descended on them. Bruce was almost captured. He was unhorsed a couple of times, but he managed to escape. And he learned a very vital lesson in trust from this heavy defeat. It was a disastrous start for Robert the Bruce and his cause. But now he was a hunted man. Pembroke would be hot on his heels for some time after this as he made his way through Perthshire to Athol and on towards the west coast to try and get to safety. You get a real feel for the place when you start to walk the ground. And to know anything about history, it's not found in the history books or the libraries or sitting there with maps, not all of which are accurate, even modern day ones. You have to get round to walking the ground. You have to simply go and look, as William Scott would do. So I've got a greater insight into Methven. It's many years since I've visited this place, and now that I know more, I'm able to look at more and I'm able to imagine more in terms of what would have been practical on the day. But it's someplace. This was the most disastrous start for the cause of Robert the Bruce. He's murdered his rival, but he has enemies all around him, and the net is closing in fast. Methven, 1306.